African Americans in the United States have a long history, long back during the period of slavery, which had them facing systematic discrimination, millions subjected to forced labor and dehumanization, and most, if not all, were denied of basic human rights, all of which were due to racism. Racism persists in various different forms in different areas such as education, healthcare, employment, and criminal justice, all of which were vital for a human being to live life. Having all of these stripped and taken away from them is unfair and not just.
So racism is still evident in the present as well. Police brutality, especially in the US, is still rampant, with George Floyd's death being the number one example. We all know how brutal they were at him. He was mercilessly killed for a light reason. We are most definitely sure it's not because of his case that he was brutally murdered, but because he was black. Discrimination is also very present in social media, and it may range from just saying racial slurs to stereotyping and underrepresentation.
Well, considering the persistence of racism throughout the years, it's definitely worth examining how historical and systematic racism played in shaping high profile legal cases. The documentary OJ Made in America appreciably highlights one of the most iconic trials in mankind. OJ Simpson's trial was not only one of the most pivotal moments in African American history, but also in the US as a whole. Despite it seemingly focusing on the celebrity's trial, it effectively unravels the complex web of historical racism and inequality which led to the trial's outcome.
So welcome dear nerds to our first episode in Kerfuffle. I'm your host Liz.
And I am Rix.
In this podcast, prepare to be intrigued, inspired, and perhaps even a little mystified as we navigate through the realms of media. We're here to spark your curiosity and ignite your thirst for knowledge.
In each episode, we bring you expert guests, riveting stories, and thought provoking discussions that will challenge your perceptions and expand your horizons on TV shows.
So whether you're a seasoned explorer of the unknown or just embarking on your quest for enlightenment, fasten your seatbelts and get ready to explore the mysteries of our world and beyond. Now let's talk about OJ. So, Arzadon James Simpson was a generational athlete, a running back for the University of South Carolina football team, and a star for the Buffalo Bills. After 13 years of playing professional sports, he pursued an acting career where he was successful as well.
Life seemed to be quite easy for OJ as he was loved by everyone, no?
Yeah, pretty much. Until one day, he was accused of a double murder, including his wife.
Bro, that escalated quick.
Watching this documentary was your first time experiencing anything related to O.J. Simpson, right?
Yeah, I didn't know much about him from football or his acting career.
Well, I know a bit about him just because of football. I heard he was an excellent player for the Buffalo Bills, but that's pretty much it. Continuing, during the time, there was a 600% increase of Negroes in America. The show pretty much highlighted how harsh the white Americans were to the Negroes. USC was a university full of white people, yet the documentary accurately depicts how he was approached because of his popularity.
I think if he wasn't a one of kind athlete, he would most likely be discriminated for his skin color.
Yeah, that is made very clear.
Simpson wanted to be judged not by his skin, but by his character, talents, and competence. Simpson transcended race because of his popularity. At that time, unknown blacks wouldn't be treated equally with white people because of racism. He didn't feel the effects of black racism because he was that guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's basically immune to racial discrimination, and he took that to his advantage.
Racism at that time was not to be joked about. Specifically, the year 1968. The year was brutal for black people. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at that time, which led to countless protests and civil rights activists. It's even crazier because the US claimed itself to be a free world, yet 22 million black men and women suffer. Black athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, Kareem, Laker Bucks legend. They attempted to boycott the 1968 Olympic Games due to racism. And guess what? Simpson didn't join the boycotting, which goes to show how he didn't care about anything else that was happening around this race. He didn't care even a little. So, USC fans didn't care because they were constantly winning games with OJ on the football field.
His success easily helped him ignore everything happening around him, around his color. To him, he had no color. He wanted to erase race as a defining factor in his life, and that is pretty much selfish of him to do so.
All of that was just from the first episode. In the next episodes, the situations for the blacks are much worse. I mean, A Korean cashier killed an innocent black teenager, and the court decided that she only gets 400 hours of community service. Talk about outrageous! I'm dumbfounded. Also, there was a clear evidence of literal police ganging up on Rodney King, and yet they still got away with it. Based on the dirt for black people, these are the only few events that happened?
In the meantime, the audience became more and more familiar with OJ's true character. In the first episode, he seemed to have a very innocent impression, but the next episode showed him his dark side. He was a womanizer. He beat his wife, Nicole Brown, up. He was a manipulative person and never relinquished control over Nicole. Then eventually, Nicole Brown was murdered, and Simpson was accused of doing so.
One of my most favorite quotes went something like, "We're officially split." I think there was something about her that was almost unattainable to him, something that he couldn't quite control. Jerry says in the episode. And I think that was part of the attraction. In the final analysis, that's what got her killed.
What that basically means is that OJ definitely killed Nicole, if not through actual murder. In a way, he ruined her. And I think that was what Greer meant when he said that, in any possible way, he got her killed. OJ and a few others wrote a book called If I Did It, which contains much more details about Simpson and his wives.
I get what you mean.
Simpson's case had so much to do with racism. The trial exhibited a divide in public perception due to racism. Something like 70% of black thinks that he is innocent and 70% of whites thinks that he's guilty. The pieces of evidences were also overwhelming, and racial bias influenced the evidence's collection and presentation.
Oh, and Mark Furman, he's literally every racist kid in the present.
His involvement greatly influenced this.
Yeah, and even the father of Nicole Brown thought that the case should be about Mark Furman. All because of the racist acts he has done before.
It led to accusations against him, suggesting he planted the glove and contaminated some of the evidence. Mainly because he was racist. He was so accurate in answering the questions too, and it became suspicious.
The iconic glove scene was so full of crap too. I understand that OJ shouldn't be wearing them because it would contaminate the evidence, but why couldn't they just compare it to his hand size?
They could even buy the same pair of gloves and have him wear those.
Yeah, but it wouldn't fit because of the latex.
The court could have done better preparation for the glove demonstration. They could have gotten expert witnesses to explain how the blood and other factors may have an effect on the glove size. And the jurors could have been much more attentive. Simpson got so lucky. In the past, until that very point, he could literally get away with anything.
That explains how iconic it was.
It was full of bullshit.
Oh, and also, another weird occurrence in the case was that the Kardashians were involved. Robert Kardashian and O.J. Simpsons were apparently besties. And for all of you who don't know, Robert Kardashian was the husband of Kris Jenner and the father of, you know it, Kourtney, Kim, and Khloe.
It was just so random that OJ had to make him read a letter to the public.
The jury was also predominantly composed of African American members and less white, due to past trials being decided by whites where the blacks are most likely to lose. Because of that, the majority of the jury didn't believe that Simpson committed the crime.
The jury decides that Simpson is not guilty. However, there's still one lingering question. Who is the murderer if not Simpson?
Personally, I still think it's Simpson, even despite the piece of evidences not adding up. I mean, it was even made clear he was a woman beater. Even Nicole herself feared him.
I mean, of course, if I were Nicole, I would be terrified. He never relinquished control over her and was constantly being manipulated by him.
And yet, after all that, guess what? He only got community service. It's insane. He's being treated as if he's a white person.
He should already be put behind bars, simply because of that reason. Yet, why wasn't he?
He's a celebrity.
That motive alone goes to show that he may have intentions for murder. Simpson also had a limited alibi and wasn't able to provide a clear account of his whereabouts at that time. Also, the Bruno Magli's shoes in the case could have been a much more bigger evidence than it was. For context, Simpson was photographed using those shoes, which left bloody footprints, yet it wasn't considered definitive evidence.
It's still so hard to believe that a criminal like O.J. Simpson is actually able to get away with something like this because of racial conflict. All because of race.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that racism is the primary cause of why the trial was considered to be the trial of the century. It's not about Simpson, it's not about Furman, it's not about Brown. Instead, it's about racial conflict. all of which were beneficial to Simpson.
Another thing I noticed was that what comes with overwhelming popularity is wasn't. OJ did have quite a bit of money, highlighting how the court can be sort of anti-poor as well to the Negros.
Yeah, considering that he had access to high quality legal representations, access to experts, settlement negotiations, influence, and many more.
One thing that might actually support Simpson being the culprit is that even years later, he actually committed a robbery crime case in 2007.
He's just so messed up, man.
Even after the allegations, he had the audacity to do something that would for sure make him a criminal. He really doesn't care at all.
He was arrested for this crime, right?
Yeah, the verdict for this case trial actually happened around 13 years to the day after he was acquitted of his murder trial. He was sentenced to 33 years, but he could apply for parole after 9 years.
Damn, 33 years for a robbery is kind of insane. Doesn't sound like he did some ordinary robbing, right?
Yeah, the jury played him by the book. Seems like justice can be served in the most bizarre ways.
But man, what a fall from grace he had. From essentially a national wonder of the US, a man that people believed, even to the extreme, could do no wrong, turned into such a disgrace. It shows how much of an intoxicating drug fame could be on a person. With all of that being said, let's move on and talk about the goods, shall we?
First, I do beg a question. What even makes a documentary exceptional?
Well, the primary aspect of a documentary that distinguishes it from others is its ability to change a person's perspective on a particular subject. In this documentary case, it tackles the major issue of racism in Simpson's trial.
The show excelled at portraying Simpson's image before the events that happened in the trial, especially for those unfamiliar with his American football and acting careers.
The strongest aspect of the show was how detailed all the interviews were. Even if you already know about the stories before watching the documentary, believe me, you do not know the story that well.
It was interesting how Simpson started off as an innocent man, then through small and tiny details, tiny clues, it became increasingly clear that he's a foul person. Examples of this were how, according to some of his closest friends, he was able to get away with anything as a child. Then he brings that as he gets older. It started off as getting away from the principal, stealing his best friend's girl, having affairs, and being a woman beater. This guy's insane.
Another example is when the defendant team explained how the case was gonna be decided, such as where people were seated, the ties worn, etc. Nicole's fear for OJ was also well described.
Everything was very well detailed. In my opinion, that was the best aspect of this documentary.
Another is that the show also paced itself really well. There was never a dull moment throughout its 7.5 hour runtime, and even the parts being portrayed as side stories in the show contribute to the succeeding events of the documentary.
The problem with other documentaries is that they can be quite a snooze fest for some people. This documentary, however, will get you on your seat and make you finish it.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, almost a decade of production for this documentary. Of course, it would be of high quality.
Ezra Edelman is a one-of-a-kind producer and director.
Moving on, let's talk about its flaws. And there isn't much to talk about, don't you agree?
Yeah, but I can name one gripe. But the production doesn't really stand out from other documentaries that talk about similar topics. Every vital information is portrayed in a clean, easy-to-follow linear matter for the most part, but it does end up feeling a little bit stale and prototypical for a documentary discussing a large focal point of the US.
I agree with you as well. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I find the experience doesn't diminish too much if you treat it like a podcast, aside from a few times. I feel like this documentary could have used more engaging visuals, but even as it stands, it's pretty solid.
Also, there was this one scene, it was very random. I'm talking about the autopsy which showed a very graphic image of Nicole's neck cut and bleeding. I don't know, I just felt very surprised seeing that, knowing the majority of the documentary didn't feature any gory graphic stuff. The documentary could have given us a head start before that happened.
Aside from that, I feel like the documentary itself was a bit too slanted on the hate OJ camp. Not to say that I'm with the like OJ camp, because I'm not. OJ is truly a terrible person, but I think documentaries are at its best when they're unbiased and shows the perspective either favor or against the idea being presented in the documentary.
Actually, in line with this, I read in a source once that the director of the documentary interviewed the well-known American poet, Ishmael Reed, to gain his perspective on O.J. Simpson, but the director ended up never using the interview. Ishmael once said in the magazine Counterpunch that he was critical of the documentary, claiming that in the documentary, the prosecutors kept on talking about theories that were disproven in court, and how a detective might have had the time to actually plant evidence. He also claimed that to make the trial about the grievances of the black community to the LAPD, the director interviewed black jurors whose opinion fits the narrative, instead of the other jurors who might have made a decision to the fact that the evidence was maybe tampered with. Whether or not these claims hold any truth, it would be interesting to have a contrary opinion to the matter to widen our understanding about the trial.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, and I really wish we had a better idea on what Ishmael and people with similar opinions to him actually feels about this trial. With that said, it's so difficult to think about other flaws in this series. It was really well done, to be honest.
Overall, OJ made an American summary a very well made documentary.
Due to its broader implications for American society, it is a thought-provoking and comprehensive documentary inviting viewers to reflect on ongoing issues such as race, celebrity, and the justice system.
It's very worth a watch. If you're looking for a good first documentary, OJ Made in America is perfect for you. It has so many goods and barely has any flaws. We both agree that it is truly one of the greatest documentaries ever created. Regardless of what you think about O.J. Simpson's court trial, you'll definitely be enlightened and educated by this documentary.
Plugging it into the Kerfuffle criteria, we're gonna go ahead and give OJ Made in America a strong 8 to a light 9 on this one. Transcript under review of OJ Made in America.